In the vast darkness of space, where ancient civilizations have ruled for millennia, a single species emerges from a small blue planet called Earth. They call themselves humans, and every galactic empire is about to learn why the universe should have left them alone. What makes humans different isn't their technology or their numbers. It's something far more terrifying. It's something that has never existed in the galaxy before. Something that will shatter every rule of warfare, diplomacy, and survival that alien species have followed for thousands of years. The Zephyrian Empire controls half the galaxy with their perfect logic and calculated strategies. The Krillian hive mind operates with flawless coordination across billions of drones. The ancient Nexari have mastered energy manipulation beyond imagination. Each of these civilizations has conquered countless worlds and enslaved entire species, but they have never encountered a species that refuses to stay down when defeated. They have never faced beings who become more dangerous when cornered. They have never met creatures who turn their greatest weaknesses into unstoppable weapons. Humanity doesn't just fight to win. Humans fight to protect what they love, to prove what they believe, and to ensure their children have a future. And when pushed to their limits, they don't break. They become something else entirely, something unstoppable. The galaxy is about to discover that there are worse things than death, slavery, or conquest. There is the fury of a species that refuses to kneel. There is the creativity of minds that see solutions where others see impossible problems. There is the unity of a people who will sacrifice everything for each other. The alien empires thought they were adding another primitive world to their collection. Instead, they just woke up the one species in the universe that should have been left alone. This is the story of what happens when humanity shows the galaxy what unstoppable really means. The morning sun cast long shadows across the wheat fields of Kansas when the first ships appeared in Earth's sky. Sarah Chen was checking the fence line on her family's farm when the horizon began to shimmer like heat waves. Except the air was cool and crisp. She shielded her eyes with her hand and squinted upward, watching as massive shapes materialized from what looked like empty sky. The ships were enormous, each one easily the size of a city. They hung in the air without making a sound, their hulls reflecting the morning light in ways that hurt to look at directly. Sarah had seen enough science fiction movies to know what this meant, but seeing it in real life made her legs feel weak. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and tried to call her brother Marcus, who worked at the nearby Air Force base. The call wouldn't go through. No signal. She tried texting, then tried to access the internet. Nothing worked. It was as if every electronic communication on Earth had been cut off at the same moment. Above her, the ships began to descend. 5,000 miles away in Geneva, Switzerland, Dr. Elena Vasquez was presenting her research on quantum physics to the International Science Council when every screen in the building went black. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the conference room in red light. Through the tall windows, she could see identical ships hovering over Lake Geneva. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence, "I believe we're about to make first contact." The delegates around the table were from dozens of countries, representing humanity's best scientific minds. They had spent years debating what they would do if this moment ever came. None of their plans had accounted for the ships simply appearing everywhere at once. "Doctor, accepted." Vasquez walked to the window and pressed her palm against the cool glass. The ship over the lake was beautiful in a terrifying way, its surface covered in patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. She had dedicated her life to understanding the universe, and now the universe had come to understand her. In the command center of the lead ship above North America, Fleet Commander Zixdal studied the primitive planet below through sensors that could detect individual life forms. The beings called themselves humans, and they were exactly what the Zephyrian Empire expected, a young species that had barely begun to explore their own solar system, with technology that wouldn't challenge a first-year cadet. "Initial scan complete, Commander," reported Navigation Officer Kethen. "The centers are mapped. Military installations identified. No weapons capable of threatening our vessels detected." Zixdal's 4 eyes studied the tactical display with satisfaction. This world would be another easy addition to the Empire. The humans had nuclear weapons, but they were crude fusion devices that could barely scratch the paint on a Zephyrian cruiser. Their most advanced aircraft moved at speeds that were laughable compared to Empire technology. Communications, Zixtal ordered. Override their primitive networks. I want every human on this planet to receive our message simultaneously. The communications officer's tentacles danced across the control surface. Ready, Commander. Begin transmission. Across Earth, every television screen, computer monitor, smartphone, and digital display suddenly showed the same image. Commander Zixtal appeared as a tall, thin being with gray-blue skin and large black eyes. When he spoke, the words came out in perfect English, though everyone who watched somehow understood him in their own language. Humans of Earth, Zixtal began, his voice calm and authoritative. And Fleet Commander Zixtal, of the Zephyrian Empire, your planet has been selected for integration into our territory. This is not a request or a negotiation. It is a statement of fact. Sarah Chen watched the message on her phone, which had somehow started working again just to display this transmission. Around the world, 7 billion humans were seeing the same thing. 21. Your species shows promise as a labor force, the alien commander continued. Those who cooperate will be relocated to designated work colonies. Those who resist will be eliminated. You have 72 hours to surrender your governments and military forces. Any attempt to attack our vessels will result in the immediate destruction of your largest population centers. The transmission ended, leaving Earth in stunned silence. In Pentagon, General Patricia Morrison was already moving. The moment the alien ships appeared, she had activated every protocol designed for this exact scenario. Her staff was coordinating with military leaders around the world, sharing intelligence and preparing for whatever came next. Ma'am, her aide reported, we're getting the same readings from every base. These ships are using some kind of technology we can't even measure properly. Our best scanners can barely detect them, even though they're right above us. General Morrison nodded grimly. She had spent her entire career preparing for threats to America and to humanity. Dearie, she had studied every potential enemy, from terrorist organizations to foreign militaries. But she had also read the classified reports about what might happen if humanity ever encountered a hostile alien species. The conclusion of every study was the same. With current technology, humanity wouldn't stand a chance. Get me President Hayes on the secure line, she ordered. The captain patched me through to every allied commander worldwide. If these things want to fight, we're going to give them one. But even as she gave the orders, General Morrison knew the truth. The aliens were right. Humanity's most advanced weapons were primitive compared to technology that could make city-sized ships appear out of thin air. The nuclear arsenal that had kept peace on Earth for decades would be useless against beings who could cross the galaxy. Dr. Elena Vasquez was thinking the same thing as she watched military jets scramble from air bases around the world. The pilots were brave, but they were flying into a fight they couldn't win with weapons that couldn't hurt the enemy. It was like sending cavalry against tanks. Unless there was something the aliens didn't understand about humans. She thought about her research, about the quantum mechanics that governed reality at its most fundamental level. The aliens clearly had technology beyond Earth's understanding, but they were still bound by the same physical laws that governed everything in the universe. And if there was one thing humans had always been good at, it was finding ways to break the rules. Dr. Vasquez, one of the other delegates, called out, "What should we do?" She turned away from the window, her mind already racing through possibilities. We do what humans have always done when faced with the impossible, she said. We figure out how to make it possible. Above them, the alien ships waited. Their commanders were confident that this would be like every other conquest the Empire had made. They had superior technology, overwhelming numbers, and the element of surprise. For the humans were trapped on a single planet with nowhere to run and no allies to call for help. But Commander Zixtal was about to learn something that wasn't in any of the Empire's databases about human behavior. Something that no alien species had ever possessed. And something they couldn't understand even if they saw it. When humans were pushed to their absolute limit, when everything they loved was threatened and all hope seemed lost, they didn't surrender. They got creative. Sarah Chen was still standing in her wheat field, but she was no longer afraid. She was angry. These aliens thought they could just show up and take her world, take her family, take everything she had ever cared about. They thought humans would just roll over and accept slavery because they had bigger ships and better weapons. They were about to find out how wrong they were. She walked back toward her farmhouse, her mind working through everything she knew about the farm's equipment, about chemistry, about physics, about anything that might be useful. Her brother Marcus had taught her about explosives when he came back from his tour in Afghanistan. Her grandfather had told her stories about the French resistance in World War II, about how ordinary people had fought back against an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. The aliens were powerful, but they were also making the same mistake that every invader throughout human history had made. They thought that superior technology was enough. They thought that fear would make humans surrender. They didn't understand that humans had been fighting impossible odds since the beginning of time, and they had developed something far more dangerous than any weapon. They had developed the absolute refusal to give up. In military bases around the world, soldiers were getting similar ideas, pulling up files on every theoretical weapon that had ever been proposed, in cities and towns and villages everywhere. Ordinary people were looking around their homes and thinking about what they could use to fight back. The aliens had given humanity 72 hours to surrender. They had no idea what humans could accomplish in 72 hours when their backs were against the wall. Commander Zixtal reviewed the initial intelligence reports with satisfaction. The humans were behaving exactly as predicted. Their military forces were scrambling, but their weapons were too primitive to be a threat. Their governments were meeting in emergency sessions, but they had no allies to call and no escape route to plan. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're detecting increased energy signatures from their military installations. They appear to be preparing some kind of response. Zixtal's translator turned his expression of amusement into something humans would recognize as a dismissive smile. Let them prepare. It will make no difference. Have our psychological warfare specialists begun broadcasting the surrender terms to their population centers? Yes, Commander. We're using their own communication networks to show them the futility of resistance protocols. What the aliens didn't realize was that their standard pacification protocols had never been tested on a species like humanity. Every other race they had conquered had been logical, calculating the odds and accepting defeat when the numbers were clearly against them. Humans were different. Dr. Vasquez was in her hotel room, video calling with physicists, chemists, engineers, and military strategists around the world. The aliens had restored Earth's communications, probably thinking it would help them coordinate the surrender. Instead, it was letting humanity's best minds work together in ways they never had before. The ships are using some kind of gravity manipulation, reported Dr. James Park from Tokyo. That's how they're staying airborne without any visible propulsion. And their hulls are reflecting our sensor readings, added Dr. Marie Dubois from Paris. Which means they're not bending light around them. Dampening, Dr. Vasquez realized they can control which frequencies pass through their defensive systems and which ones don't. So how do we hurt them? Asked Colonel Rodriguez from Mexico City, his video feed showing him in full combat gear. Vasquez was quiet for a moment, thinking through the implications. Then she smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We don't fight their technology, she said. We fight their assumptions. The room fell silent as she explained her idea. It was dangerous. It was probably impossible. It would require every nation on Earth to work together in perfect coordination, and it would need things that didn't exist yet to be built in less than 3 days. It was exactly the kind of plan that only humans would be crazy enough to attempt. Dr. Vasquez, Colonel Rodriguez said quietly, if this works, you'll have saved the human race. If it fails, she interrupted, we'll go down fighting, and that's more than these aliens are expecting. Around the world, the message began to spread, not through official channels or government communications, but through the networks that humans had always used when they needed to organize quickly and quietly. Social media, amateur radio, text messages, and word of mouth carried the plan from person to person. The aliens were monitoring human communications, but they were looking for military coordination and government surrender negotiations. They weren't paying attention to what looked like ordinary civilian chatter. Sarah Chen received the message through her neighbor, who had heard it from his son, who had seen it in a gaming forum online. By the time she understood what Dr. Vasquez was proposing, similar conversations were happening in every country on Earth. The plan was insane. It required ordinary people to do things that trained soldiers would consider suicidal. It needed farmers and teachers and mechanics and students to become warriors in a fight that might kill them all. But it also offered something that none of the official government plans did. It offered hope. And for humans, hope was the most dangerous weapon in the universe. As the first day of the 72-hour deadline came to an end, Commander Zixtal was pleased with the progress. Several smaller governments had already sent preliminary surrender offers. The human military forces were impressive for such a primitive species, but they were clearly recognizing the futility of resistance. Everything was proceeding exactly according to Empire protocol. What he didn't know was that in laboratories, workshops, garages, and basements around the world, humanity was building something that had never existed before. Something that would turn their greatest weakness into their ultimate strength. Something unstoppable. The countdown had begun, but it wasn't counting down to humanity's surrender. It was counting down to the moment when the galaxy would learn why you should never corner a species that refuses to quit. The second day of humanity's deadline began with what appeared to be chaos, but was actually the most coordinated effort in human history. From the outside, it looked like panic. People were leaving cities, abandoning their jobs, and gathering in strange configurations that made no sense to outside observers. The alien monitoring systems recorded it all as the expected breakdown of human civilization. They were completely wrong. In a converted airplane hangar outside Denver, Colorado, Maria Santos was welding her 15th unit of the day. She had been an aerospace engineer before the aliens arrived, designing components for commercial satellites. Now she was building something that had never existed before, using blueprints that had been created and shared across the globe in less than 24 hours.
"Maria," called out Tom Bradley, a former auto mechanic who had become their assembly coordinator.
Invitation of midnight. How many more can you complete? She wiped sweat from her forehead and looked at the production line they had set up. Welders, machinists, electronics technicians, and volunteers with no technical background at all were working side by side, each person contributing whatever skills they had. The device they were building looked like nothing any of them had ever seen before, but they all understood what it was supposed to do. 20 more, maybe 25 if I skip lunch, she replied. What's the count from the other sites? Tom checked his tablet, which was displaying real-time updates from similar operations around the world. Moscow is ahead of schedule. The Australians finished their quota 6 hours ago and are helping coordinate the Pacific region. Africa is struggling with power issues, but they're improvising with solar arrays. Similar scenes were playing out everywhere. In Sao Paulo, Brazil, factory workers were retooling automobile assembly lines to produce components designed by professors they had never met. In Mumbai, India, computer programmers were writing software to coordinate devices that existed only in theory. In Stockholm, Sweden, high school students were following instructions posted anonymously on the internet to build electronics that their teachers didn't understand. The plan that Dr. Italo Vasquez had conceived was beautiful in its simplicity and terrifying in its scope. Instead of trying to match the aliens' advanced technology, humanity would do what it had always done best: adapt, improvise, and use whatever was available to solve impossible problems. But the plan also required something that no other species in the galaxy possessed: the willingness of millions of people to risk everything for others they had never met. Commander Zixtal was reviewing the daily intelligence reports when Navigation Officer Kevin approached with what appeared to be confusion in his large black eyes. "Sir," Kevin began carefully, "we're observing unusual behavior patterns among the human population." "Elaborate," Zixtal ordered, not looking up from his tactical display. "They're engaging in large-scale movements that don't correspond to evacuation or surrender protocols. Instead of fleeing from our ships, they're concentrating in specific geographic locations. Instead of hoarding resources, they're sharing materials freely across political boundaries." Now, Zixtal looked up, his 4 eyes focusing on the report. "Show me." The main display lit up with a real-time view of Earth, marked with thousands of small indicators showing human activity. Instead of the random panic that should have been occurring, the movement patterns showed organization and purpose. "Are they preparing some kind of military resistance?" Zixtal asked. No, sir. Our sensors show no concentration of their primitive weapons. No military formations. Most of the activity appears to be style. Zixtal studied the patterns with growing irritation. In his 3 centuries of service to the Empire, he had conquered 47 worlds. The process was always the same: overwhelming display of force, ultimatum, period of panic and denial, then gradual acceptance and surrender. The humans were definitely in the panic stage, but they weren't behaving like any other species he had encountered. Perhaps their panic has triggered some kind of irrational group behavior, suggested Tactical Officer Vorthak. Some species engage in meaningless activity when faced with inevitable defeat. Monitor the situation closely, Zixtal ordered. If their industrial activity poses any threat to our operations, we will accelerate the timeline. What the aliens couldn't understand was that the meaningless activity they were observing was actually the most meaningful thing humanity had ever done. For the first time in history, every human on Earth was working toward the same goal. Dr. Vasquez was in a command center that had been set up in an abandoned shopping mall in Switzerland, coordinating with teams around the world. The massive main court had been converted into a communications hub, with screens showing progress reports from every continent. Geneva team to all stations, she announced into her headset. We have confirmation that the theoretical framework is sound. Repeat, the physics works. We are go for implementation. Cheers erupted from dozens of locations around the world, transmitted through speakers that filled the mall with the sound of humanity refusing to quit. The key to her plan was something the aliens had missed in their analysis of human technology. They had focused on humanity's weapons, their transportation, their energy production. They had calculated correctly that all of these were far inferior to Empire standards. But they had completely ignored human understanding of quantum mechanics. Dr. Vasquez had spent her career studying the ways that subatomic particles behaved when observed and manipulated. Her research had focused on quantum entanglement, the phenomenon where particles could be connected across any distance, sharing states instantaneously. The practical applications had always been limited by the difficulty of maintaining entangled states in real-world conditions until the aliens arrived with their gravity manipulation technology. Dr. Park, she called out to her colleague in Tokyo. What's your reading on the gravitational field emanating from the ship above you? Consistent with your calculations, his voice crackled through the speakers. The field is maintaining a steady resonance frequency. It's almost like they're broadcasting a carrier wave that we can piggyback on. Dr. Dubois from Paris joined the conversation. The entangled particles are remaining stable within the alien gravity field. I can't believe this is actually working. What they had discovered was that the alien ships, in order to maintain their position and coordinate their movements, were generating a planet-wide gravitational network. It was an elegant solution that allowed them to communicate instantaneously across any distance and maintain perfect formation. It was also something they could hack. The devices being built in workshops around the world were quantum resonators designed to tap into the aliens' own gravitational communication network. Instead of trying to break through their defenses, humanity would use their technology against them. But the plan required precise timing, perfect coordination, and the participation of millions of people who would need to trust that their small part of the effort would contribute to something larger than themselves. It required humanity to act as one species for the first time in its history. Sarah Chen was standing in her wheat field again, but this time she wasn't alone. She had gathered, each person carrying a device that looked like a cross between a radio and a telescope. The instructions she had received were simple. Point the device at the alien ship, activate it at exactly the right moment, and hold it steady for 60 seconds. The consequences of failure were also simple. The extinction of the human race. Sarah, her neighbor, called out. Are you sure we're doing this right? I mean, what if the scientists are wrong? She looked around at the faces of people she had known her entire life. Farmers, teachers, shop owners, retirees. None of them were scientists or soldiers or government officials. They were ordinary people being asked to save the world with equipment they had built themselves, from plans downloaded from the internet. If they're wrong, she said, then at least we tried. And if they're right, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew what was at stake. Around the world, similar groups were gathering. In Central Park in New York City, office workers and taxi drivers and street musicians stood shoulder to shoulder, each holding their piece of humanity's last hope. On the beaches of Australia, surfers and lifeguards and tourists formed a line along the shore, their devices pointed at the ships hovering over Sydney and Melbourne. The alien monitoring systems recorded it all as another example of irrational human behavior. Thousands of primitive gatherings, with no apparent military purpose. They had no idea they were looking at the largest coordinated attack in the history of warfare. Dr. Vasquez watched the countdown timer on her screen. 4 hours until the moment of activation. Around the world, teams were making final adjustments and running last-minute tests. The margin for error was essentially zero. If even a small percentage of the devices failed to activate properly, the entire plan would collapse. Dr. Vasquez, one of her assistants, reported, "We're getting some unusual readings from the alien ships. Their energy signatures are fluctuating slightly." She frowned and pulled up the sensor data. The fluctuations were minor, but they were consistent across all the ships worldwide. "They're scanning us," she realized. "They've noticed the increase in industrial activity, and they're trying to figure out what we're doing." This was the moment she had been dreading. If the aliens discovered the plan before it could be implemented, they would either destroy the devices or accelerate their timeline and begin the invasion immediately. "All stations, this is Geneva Command," she announced. "We may have been detected. Reading about emergency activation. If the aliens make any aggressive moves, we implement immediately." The response was immediate and unanimous. "Copy, Geneva. Standing by." Commander Zixtal was becoming increasingly frustrated with the human behavior patterns. His intelligence officers had been monitoring the unusual gatherings for hours, but they couldn't determine any logical purpose for the activities. "Basis. Sir," Tactical Officer Vorthak reported, "We've completed detailed scans of the human gathering points. They appear to be carrying some kind of primitive electronic devices, but our sensors can't determine their function." "Could they be weapons?" Zixtal asked. "Highly unlikely. The energy output is minimal and they don't contain any explosive materials. They appear to be constructed from communication equipment and basic electronics." Zixtal studied the tactical display, showing thousands of red dots representing human gatherings around the planet. Each dot represented hundreds or thousands of humans, all carrying identical devices, all pointed at his ships. "It could be some kind of religious ceremony," suggested Communications Officer Tixon. "Many primitive species engage in ritual behavior when faced with superior forces, but something about the situation was bothering Zixtal. In all his experience conquering primitive worlds, he had never seen this level of organization from a species that was supposedly in chaos. The humans were behaving with a coordination that suggested advanced planning and communication. "Run a deeper scan," he ordered. "I want to know what those devices do." It was the decision that would change the course of the war. The deep scan sent high-energy pulses toward the human gathering points, designed to penetrate and analyze the electronic devices. But the pulses also interacted with the quantum resonators in ways that neither side expected. In her command center, Dr. Vasquez watched in horror as alarms began sounding from every monitoring station. "Geneva, this is Mumbai," Dr. Patel's voice crackled through the speakers. "The alien scan just activated our devices. The quantum entanglement is beginning. All stations report," Dr. Vasquez called out. The responses came from around the world. Tokyo confirming premature activation. São Paulo showing quantum resonance. Sydney devices are online and stable. What should have been a catastrophe was turning into an opportunity. The alien scans had accidentally triggered the human devices 3 hours ahead of schedule, but the quantum entanglement was holding stable. "All teams, Dr. Vasquez announced, trying to keep her voice calm. "This is not a drill. We are going to full activation immediately. Execute plan unstoppable now." Around the world, millions of humans raised their devices and activated them simultaneously. Commander Zixtal was staring at his tactical display in disbelief. The energy readings from the human devices had just increased by several orders of magnitude, and his sensors were showing impossible readings. "Sir," Navigation Officer Keithan reported, his voice tight with confusion. "We're detecting quantum-level interference with our gravitational communication network." "That's impossible," Zixtel replied. "These primitives don't have quantum technology." "Sir, the interference is increasing." "It appears to be structured, organized. But in Paris, it's some kind of signal." On planets across the Zephyrian Empire, quantum communication arrays began receiving a transmission that shouldn't have been possible. It was coming from a primitive world on the edge of known space, a world that had only just been contacted for the first time. The message was simple, broadcast in mathematical concepts that any intelligent species could understand. "We are humanity. We will not surrender. We will not submit. We will not be slaves. If you want our world, you will have to fight us for every inch of it. And we promise you this, we will make it cost more than you ever imagined." But the message was more than just words. Embedded in the quantum transmission was something that made every alien species in the galaxy take notice. It was proof of concept. Humanity had just demonstrated that they could hack the most advanced communication network in known space using equipment built in their garages and basements. They had turned the aliens' own technology against them, not through superior science, but through sheer creative desperation. Commander Zixtel felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of conquest. Doubt. "Sir," Communications Officer Tixan reported, his translator carrying a note of concern. "We're receiving urgent priority messages from Empire Command. The quantum interference is being detected throughout our territory. They want to know how a primitive species gained access to our communication network." Dix Tal stared at the tactical display, watching as the impossible energy readings continued to fluctuate around his fleet. The humans had done something that should have been impossible, and they had done it in less than 2 days. For the first time since arriving at Earth, he wondered if the Empire had made a mistake. On the surface below, millions of humans were discovering that their desperate plan had worked better than anyone had dared to hope. The quantum resonators weren't just interfering with the alien communications. They were providing access to information that no human had ever seen before. Dr. Vasquez was staring at data that was streaming across her screens. Data that was coming directly from the alien ships themselves. "By God," she whispered, "we're inside their network. We can see everything." What they saw changed everything they thought they knew about the invasion. The Zephyrian Empire was vast, controlling hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. But it was also overstretched, dealing with rebellions, resource shortages, and challenges on multiple fronts. The invasion of Earth wasn't a casual expansion. It was a desperate attempt to acquire new resources and slave labor to prop up an empire that was beginning to crumble. More importantly, humanity could see that Earth wasn't the Empire's only target. Dozens of other species were scheduled for conquest or integration in the coming months. Species that had never heard of humanity, that had no idea what was coming. Dr. Vasquez, her assistant, called out, "We're getting response signals from some of the other species mentioned in these files. I think our transmission reached more than just the Empire." She looked at the communication logs and felt her breath catch. The quantum entanglement had spread the human message throughout the galaxy, and other species were beginning to respond. Species that had been hiding, planning their own resistance. Species that had been waiting for someone to make the first move. Species that had been looking for allies. Humanity had just announced to the galaxy that Earth would not surrender. But they had also accidentally started something much larger. They had started a revolution. Commander Zixtel received the emergency communication from Empire Command with growing alarm. The humans' quantum interference hadn't just disrupted communications, it had somehow spread throughout the Empire's network, reaching worlds that were light years away from Earth. Getting information. Details about Empire operations, invasion plans, resource allocations. Information that was now in the hands of every species the Empire had marked for conquest. "Sir," Tactical Officer Borthak reported, "we're receiving priority orders from High Command. We are to begin immediate invasion operations. They want this world secured before the humans can cause any more disruption." Zixtel nodded grimly. The easy conquest he had expected was over. Now it would be a real war. But as he gave the orders to begin the attack, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Empire was making a terrible mistake. The The humans had already proven they could do the impossible once. What else were they capable of? On Earth, the countdown timer had reached 0. But instead of marking humanity's surrender, it marked the beginning of something unprecedented. The moment when a single species decided to fight not just for themselves, but for every other species in the galaxy that deserved to be free. The moment when humanity became truly unstoppable. The invasion began at dawn on the third day, but it wasn't the invasion that either side had expected. Commander Zixtal had planned for resistance from primitive military forces using crude weapons that couldn't penetrate Empire shields. Instead, his fleet found themselves under attack from weapons that shouldn't have existed, fired by people who shouldn't have been able to coordinate such precise strikes. The first sign that everything had changed came when the lead assault ship moved into position over New York City. The ship was designed to deploy atmospheric suppressors that would make breathing difficult for humans while allowing Zephyrian troops to operate normally. It was a standard tactic that had worked on dozens of worlds. As the ship descended through the cloud layer, something impossible happened. The quantum resonators that Dr. Vasquez's team had built weren't just communication devices. They were quantum manipulators, capable of interfering with any system that relied on quantum mechanics for its operation. Minute-hour. In the universe, from computers to energy shields to artificial gravity, depended on quantum effects. The lead assault ship suddenly found its shields flickering as millions of quantum resonators focused their interference patterns on its defensive systems. The ship's artificial gravity began fluctuating wildly, throwing Zephyrian crew members around like toys. Most critically, the ship's navigation system, which relied on quantum processors to calculate position and movement, began producing random errors. Commander, Navigation Officer Keithan called out an alarm. We're losing navigational control. The ship is drifting off course. Zixtal gripped his command chair as the massive vessel lurched sideways. Through the viewport, he could see the sprawling city of New York growing larger as the ship descended in an uncontrolled fall toward the urban landscape. Emergency thrusters, he ordered. All power to maneuvering. But the quantum interference was affecting every system on the ship. The emergency thrusters fired erratically, sending the vessel into a slow spin that brought it dangerously close to the tall buildings of Manhattan. On the streets below, 8 million New Yorkers were watching the impossible sight of an alien warship careening out of control above their city. But instead of running in panic, they were cheering. Maria Santos had flown in from Denver as part of the technical support team, and she was standing on the roof of the Empire State Building with a direct quantum resonator aimed at the alien ship. Around the city, thousands of similar devices were creating a web of interference that was tearing apart the ship's control systems. Target 2 is moving into range, someone shouted over the communication link. Maria adjusted her device's frequency and watched as a second alien ship began experiencing the same problems as the first. The beauty of the plan was its scalability. Each quantum resonator was small and relatively weak, but when millions of them worked together, they could overwhelm even the most advanced defensive systems. The aliens had made a critical error in their analysis of human technology. They had assumed that humanity's primitive electronics meant that humans didn't understand advanced physics. They couldn't have been more wrong. Commander Zixtal managed to get his ship under control just before it crashed into the Chrysler Building, but the damage was severe. Half his systems were offline, and the ones that were still working were unreliable. Around the world, the same thing was happening to every ship in the Empire fleet. Sir, Communications Officer Tixan reported, we're receiving similar reports from all attack groups. The quantum interference is planet-wide. It's affecting every ship in the fleet. But the quantum resonators were just the beginning of humanity's resistance. Dr. Teak Brelas. Elena Vasquez was coordinating the global defense from her command center in Switzerland, but she was also receiving information that was changing everything she thought she knew about the war they were fighting. Dr. Vasquez, her communications officer, reported, we're getting responses to our galactic broadcast. Species from across the Empire are sending us information. The main screen filled with data streams from dozens of different worlds, star maps, technical specifications, military intelligence, and most importantly, offers of alliance from species that had been planning their own resistance to the Empire. The Kithara system has been stockpiling weapons for 3 years, one message reported. They're ready to begin open rebellion if they have support from other systems. The Nixari have developed stealth technology that can hide entire fleets from Empire sensors, another message declared. They're willing to share it with any species that opposes the Empire. The Borellian Council controls the primary supply lines for Empire military equipment, a third message revealed, all protocols and supplies to the conquest fleets. What humanity had accidentally accomplished with their quantum broadcast was the creation of a galactic resistance network. For the first time in Empire history, the conquered species were coordinating their efforts across multiple star systems. But the most important message came from a species called the Vorthan, who had been fighting a guerrilla war against the Empire for over a century. Humans of Earth. The Vorthan message began. We have been monitoring your resistance with great interest. Your quantum manipulation technology is unlike anything we have encountered. We believe it can be adapted to disrupt Empire technology on a galactic scale. We are sending technical specifications that will allow you to upgrade your devices, but be warned. The Empire will not tolerate this level of disruption. They will send their most powerful ships and their most ruthless commanders to destroy your world. The technical specifications that followed the message made Dr. Vasquez's breath catch. The Vorthan had been studying Empire technology for decades, and they had discovered weaknesses that could be exploited on a massive scale. All teams, she announced over the global communication network, were receiving upgrade protocols from our new allies. Begin implementation immediately. And prepare for a much larger fight than we expected. The upgrades weren't just improvements to the quantum resonators. They were complete redesigns that would turn each device into a node in a galaxy-spanning network. Instead of just interfering with local alien ships, the upgraded devices would be able to disrupt Empire operations across hundreds of light years. Building the upgraded devices would require resources and manufacturing capabilities that humanity didn't have time to develop. That's when the second wave of messages began arriving. Of the cargo vessel Aurora's Dream came a transmission that was clearly human, but was originating from somewhere in deep space. We're part of a human colony ship that left Earth 60 years ago. The Procaster. We've been monitoring the invasion and we're coming home. Dr. Vasquez stared at the communication display. That's impossible. We don't have any colony ships. But the message continued. We're not the only ones. There are 17 human colonies scattered across this part of the galaxy. That most of us left Earth to explore or mine asteroids or establish research outposts. We've been quiet, staying out of Empire territory, but we've been watching and learning. The screen filled with additional signals from human settlements that Earth had no idea existed. Small groups of explorers, scientists, and adventurers who had been using experimental faster-than-light drives to establish footholds throughout the galaxy. The capabilities you need. Captain Murphy's message continued. We have ships, we have weapons, and we have something the Empire has never faced before. Humans who have been living in space for decades, who know how to fight in zero gravity, and who really don't like bullies. Commander Zixtal was struggling to understand reports that seemed to defy everything the Empire knew about human capabilities. Sir, Intelligence Officer Crexon reported, we're detecting faster-than-light signatures throughout this sector. Ships are arriving from multiple directions. Empire reinforcements? Zixtal asked hopefully. No, sir. The signatures don't match any known Empire technology. They appear to be human. That was impossible. According to every intelligence report, humans had barely achieved interplanetary travel, let alone faster-than-light capability. They were a single-world species with primitive technology. Sir, Tactical Officer Vorthak called out, sensors are detecting incoming vessels. They're small, but there are a lot of them. The tactical display lit up with hundreds of contacts moving toward Earth from every direction. The ships were indeed small compared to Empire vessels, but they were fast, maneuverable, and armed with weapons that Empire sensors couldn't identify. Open communications with the lead vessel, Zixtal ordered. The response came immediately, and it was definitely human. Base Defense Fleet, the voice announced with cold professionalism. You are in violation of interstellar sovereignty laws and are ordered to withdraw from Earth space immediately. Zixtal's translator struggled with the concept of interstellar sovereignty laws, since no primitive species had ever claimed such authority. Unknown vessels, he responded. You are interfering with legitimate Empire operations. Withdraw immediately or you will be destroyed. Admiral Chen's laughter came clearly through the communication channel.
Commander, you're about to learn something important about humans. We don't withdraw.
We don't surrender. And we really don't like being threatened. The Defense Fleet wasn't a formal military organization. It was a collection of mining ships, exploration vessels, research platforms, and cargo haulers that had been modified for combat using technology that no one on Earth had ever seen. The humans who had left Earth decades earlier had encountered other species, traded for advanced technology, and learned things about space warfare that Earth had never had the chance to discover. More importantly, they had learned how to fight in the three-dimensional environment of space, where traditional military tactics didn't apply. All ships, Admiral Chen announced over the fleet communication network. Remember what we're fighting for, down there. That's where our families came from. Oh, and back at we to this right, the response from the fleet was immediate and unanimous. Copy, Admiral. Let's show them what humans can do. The battle that followed would be studied by military strategists for centuries, but not for the reasons anyone expected. The human deep space defense fleet didn't try to match the Empire ships in size or firepower. Instead, they used tactics that the aliens had never encountered before. Swarm attacks by dozens of small ships that could change direction faster than Empire gunners could track them. Coordinated strikes that hit multiple targets simultaneously. Most importantly, they used the quantum resonators that Earth was broadcasting to disrupt Empire systems while maintaining perfect coordination among human forces. But the real surprise came when the upgraded quantum resonators began operating. Dr. Vasquez had coordinated the global upgrade in record time, with manufacturing facilities around the world producing components that were immediately distributed to every population center on Earth. The new devices didn't just interfere with local alien ships, they created a network effect that amplified each other's capabilities. Initiating global quantum network, she announced from her command center. Around the world, millions of upgraded quantum resonators activated simultaneously, creating a web of quantum interference that extended far beyond Earth's atmosphere. The effect was immediate and dramatic. At Palace, every Empire ship within 10 light years of Earth suddenly found their systems failing. Navigation computers crashed. Weapons systems shut down. Communication arrays went silent. Most critically, the faster-than-light drives that allowed Empire ships to travel between star systems became completely inoperable. Commander Zixtal watched in horror as his fleet was effectively stranded in the Earth system with failing technology and no way to call for help. Sir, Navigation Officer Kethan reported, we've lost faster-than-light capability. All ships are reporting the same problem. But the quantum network was doing more than just disrupting Empire technology. It was also amplifying human capabilities in ways that no one had expected. The human ships in the Deep Space Defense Fleet suddenly found their own systems operating with unprecedented efficiency. Their weapons were more accurate, their shields were stronger, and their coordination was perfect. It was as if every human ship had become part of a single massive organism. Admiral, one of the fleet captains reported, our systems are operating at 150% of normal capacity. It's like the quantum field is boosting our technology instead of interfering with it. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. That's because our technology was designed by humans who understand quantum mechanics. The aliens' technology was designed by a species that just uses it without really understanding it. What the Empire had never realized was that their quantum-based technology was actually less sophisticated than humanity's understanding of quantum physics. The aliens used quantum effects, but they didn't truly comprehend them. Humans, on the other hand, had built their quantum technology from the ground up based on theoretical understanding. The result was that the quantum interference field that crippled Empire technology actually enhanced human systems. But the most important effect of the global quantum network was happening on a much larger scale. Throughout the galaxy, Empire ships and installations suddenly found themselves cut off from their central command structure. The quantum interference was propagating through the Empire's communication network, creating chaos on hundreds of worlds. At the same time, the rebel species that had been secretly coordinating with Earth were launching their own attacks, using the disruption to strike at Empire targets that had been previously untouchable. The Cathara system attacked the Empire's regional command center. The Nixari launched stealth raids on military supply depots. The Borellian Council cut off supply lines to 3 entire Empire fleets. What had started as the conquest of a single primitive world had become a galaxy-wide rebellion. Dr. Vasquez was monitoring the reports from across the galaxy when she realized the full scope of what humanity had accomplished. "We didn't just save Earth," she said quietly to her team. "We started a revolution that's going to free the entire galaxy." But even as she said it, she knew that the real fight was just beginning. The Empire was vast and powerful, and they would not give up easily. And when they recovered from the initial shock, they would return with everything they had. Humanity would need to be ready. Commander Zixtel was receiving the worst news of his long military career. His fleet was stranded, his technology was failing, and his home empire was under attack from species that had been considered pacified for decades. "Sir," Communications Officer Tixon reported, "we're receiving fragmentary reports from Empire Command. Multiple systems are in revolt, and the quantum interference is spreading throughout our network." Zixtal stared at the tactical display, which showed Earth surrounded by hundreds of small human ships and millions of quantum interference generators. A primitive world that should have been conquered in hours had instead become the catalyst for the largest rebellion in Empire history. "Send a message to any Empire vessel that can still receive communications," he ordered. "The humans are not a primitive species. They are the most dangerous enemy the Empire has ever faced." But even as he gave the order, Zixtel knew it was probably too late. The Empire had awoken something that it couldn't control. Something unstoppable. On Earth, humanity was celebrating their first victory against impossible odds. But around the world, people were already preparing for the next phase of the war. They had proven that humans could fight back against superior technology. Now they had to prove that they could win. And with allies across the galaxy, with quantum technology that could disrupt Empire operations on a massive scale, and with the unshakable determination that had carried them through every challenge in human history, they were ready to show the universe what unstoppable really meant. The galaxy would never be the same. Security. 6 months after the failed invasion of Earth, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The Zephyrian Empire, which had controlled nearly half of known space for over 1,000 years, was collapsing from within. The quantum interference network that humanity had created had done more than disrupt their technology. It had shattered the foundation of their power. Without reliable, faster-than-light communication and transportation, the Empire couldn't coordinate their forces or maintain control over their conquered worlds. But what the Empire hadn't expected was how quickly humanity would learn to use their victory. Dr. Alina Vasquez was no longer working out of a converted shopping mall in Switzerland. She was aboard the HSS Breakthrough, humanity's first deep space research vessel, studying the wreckage of alien technology in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The ship itself was a testament to how much had changed. It combined human engineering with technology freely shared by their new allies across the galaxy. Dr. Vasquez, her research assistant, called out, "We're getting another data packet from the Vorthan technical team." She floated over to the communication station, still adjusting to the zero-gravity environment that was becoming humanity's new frontier. The Vorthan had been incredibly generous with their knowledge, sharing centuries of research into Empire technology and tactics. But the most valuable intelligence was coming from an unexpected source. Former Empire officers who were defecting in increasing numbers. "This is Sub-Commander Yethekran of the former Empire cruiser Dominance," the latest message began. "I am requesting asylum with the Human Alliance in exchange for complete tactical information about Empire defensive systems." Sub-Commander Yethekran was the 15th Empire officer to defect in the past month. Each defection brought new intelligence about Empire operations, but they also brought something more valuable: proof that the Empire's grip on its own forces was weakening. Vasquez, the ship's communication officer, announced, "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. It's Admiral Chen." The main screen filled with the image of Admiral Jessica Chen, who is now coordinating the human deep space defense fleet from a command ship orbiting Earth. Her fleet had grown from a few hundred modified civilian vessels to over 2,000 purpose-built warships, constructed using technology that combined human engineering with alien science. "Elena," Admiral Chen said, "we've got a situation developing in the Zirion system. The local Empire commander has decided to make a last stand, and he's threatening to destroy the civilian population if we try to liberate the system. Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly. This was the Empire's new strategy. If they couldn't win through superior technology, they would use terror tactics in hostage situations to try to maintain control. What do we know about the system? She asked. 12 billion civilians across 4 worlds, Admiral Chen replied. 3 different species, all of them enslaved by the Empire for over 2 centuries. The local commander has positioned orbital bombardment platforms above each inhabited world and is threatening total annihilation if any human ships enter the system. This was exactly the kind of challenge that human military doctrine had evolved to address. The old approach would have been to either accept the Empire's terms or risk the lives of billions of civilians in a direct assault. But humanity had developed a third option. Have you briefed the Nexari stealth fleet? Dr. Vasquez asked. They're standing by, Admiral Chen confirmed. But we need your quantum network to coordinate the operation. This has to be perfectly timed, or we lose everything. The plan they were discussing had never been attempted on this scale, but it represented everything humanity had learned about fighting an enemy with superior technology. Instead of matching the Empire's strengths, they would exploit their weaknesses. I'll coordinate with the quantum network, Dr. Vasquez agreed. Give me 6 hours to establish the link. What they were planning was essentially a magic trick on an interstellar scale. The Nexari stealth technology could hide ships from Empire sensors, but it couldn't hide the quantum signatures that the Empire used to coordinate their defensive systems. However, if the quantum network could generate enough interference at exactly the right moment, the Empire's sensors would be blind for just long enough to allow the stealth fleet to get into position. But the operation would require perfect coordination between human quantum generators on Earth, Nexari stealth ships positioned throughout the Zarian system, and Vorthan technical specialists who could hack the Empire's defensive systems once they were disrupted. It was the kind of complex multi-species operation that would have been impossible before humanity's accidental creation of the Galactic Resistance Network. Commander Zixtal was no longer in command of a fleet. He was commanding a single damaged cruiser that was barely holding together, hiding in an abandoned star system on the edge of former Empire territory. His crew of 300 had been reduced to fewer than 50, and most of his ship's systems were still unreliable due to ongoing quantum interference. In the past 6 months than the Empire had learned in centuries of conquering other species. Sir, his remaining intelligence officer reported, we're intercepting communications about a planned human operation in the Zirion system. Party intelligence, with the grim fascination of a professional soldier who had found himself outmatched by an enemy he had underestimated. The humans weren't just winning individual battles. They were transforming the entire nature of interstellar warfare. Traditional Empire strategy was based on overwhelming force applied to specific targets. The Empire would concentrate their most powerful ships and weapons against enemy strongholds, using their technological superiority to achieve quick, decisive victories. Human strategy was completely different. Instead of concentrating force, they distributed it. Instead of relying on superior technology, they used creativity and coordination. Most importantly, instead of fighting as a single species, they had somehow convinced dozens of other species to work together as allies rather than subjects. Sir, his tactical officer asked, should we warn the Zirian commander about the human plans? Zixtal considered the question for a long moment. Commander Vectul in the Zirion system was holding 12 billion civilians hostage in a desperate attempt to maintain Empire control. If the human operation succeeded, those civilians would be freed, but Vectul would likely be killed or captured. Yet Zixtal warned him, Vectul might be able to strengthen his defenses. But he might also decide to carry out his threat and murder billions of innocent beings rather than face defeat. No, Zixtal decided. We will observe and record the human tactics for future analysis, but we will not interfere. The decision marked a fundamental change in Zixtal's thinking. He was no longer fighting to preserve the Empire. He was fighting to understand an enemy that had already won. The liberation of the Zirian system began with what appeared to be a complete human retreat. Admiral Chen's fleet, which had been massing at the edge of the system for days, suddenly changed course and began moving away from Zirion at maximum speed. Every human ship activated their faster-than-light drive simultaneously, disappearing from Empire sensors in what looked like a panicked evacuation. Commander Vectul, commanding the Empire forces in the Zerion system, watched the human withdrawal with satisfaction. As I predicted, he announced to his staff, the humans are not willing to risk civilian casualties for their so-called liberation. They are retreating rather than face the consequences of their interference. What Vectul didn't know was that the human fleet hadn't actually left the system. They had jumped to predetermined coordinates that were still within the system, but were hidden behind the gravitational shadows of uninhabited gas giants and asteroid fields. More importantly, the human withdrawal was the signal for the real operation to begin. Out the Zerion system, Nexari stealth ships that had been positioned for weeks began moving toward their targets. The ships were completely invisible to Empire sensors, using technology that bent electromagnetic radiation around them. But stealth technology alone wouldn't be enough. The Empire's orbital bombardment platforms were automated systems that would begin destroying the civilian populations the moment they detected any unauthorized ships in the system. That's where the quantum network came in. Dr. Vasquez was coordinating the operation from the HSS Breakthrough, which was positioned just outside the Zerion system's gravitational boundary. Around Earth, millions of quantum resonators were preparing to generate a coordinated interference pulse that would be transmitted across dozens of light years. All quantum stations, she announced over the Galactic Communication Network, prepare for synchronized activation. We get one chance at this. The beauty of the plan was its use of the Empire's own technology against them. The quantum interference would be transmitted through the same network that the Empire used for faster-than-light communication, allowing it to reach the Zerion system instantaneously. But the interference had to be precisely timed and calibrated to disrupt the bombardment platforms without affecting the stealth ships or the civilian populations. Nexari fleet reports ready, her communication officer announced. 30, Vorthan technical team standing by, came another report. Human quantum network fully charged and synchronized, Dr. Bunker. Vasquez confirmed. The countdown began. At exactly the predetermined moment, millions of quantum resonators on Earth and dozens of other worlds activated simultaneously, sending a coordinated pulse of quantum interference through the Empire's communication network. The effect in the Zerion system was immediate and precise. Every Empire sensor array, communication relay, and automated system experienced exactly 4.7 seconds of complete system failure. It wasn't long enough to cause permanent damage, but it was long enough for the Nexari stealth ships to move into position around each orbital bombardment platform. When the Empire systems came back online, they found Nexari boarding teams already inside their most critical facilities. But the operation wasn't just about neutralizing the bombardment platforms. It was about liberating an entire star system in a way that demonstrated the new kind of warfare that humanity had pioneered. The Vorthan technical specialists, working from data provided by defecting Empire officers, had identified the central control codes for every automated system in the Zerion system. When the Nexari boarding teams reached the platform's command centers, they uploaded virus programs that gave control of Empire systems to the resistance forces. Within minutes, the orbital bombardment platforms that had been threatening civilian populations were instead protecting them from any remaining Empire forces. Commander Vectul watched his command crumble around him in a way that he had never seen before. His enemies hadn't destroyed his forces, they had stolen them. His own weapons were now pointed at his own ships, controlled by the species he had been oppressing for centuries. All ships, he ordered desperately, prepare for immediate evacuation. We're abandoning the system, but even that option had been taken away from him. The quantum interference had also disabled the faster-than-light drives on every Empire ship in the system. They were stranded, just as Zixtal's fleet had been stranded at Earth. Sir, his communication officer reported. We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Admiral Chen's image appeared on the screen, and her message was simple. Commander Vectul, you are surrounded and your weapons are no longer under your control. You have two options. Surrender and face trial for your crimes against the civilian populations under your control, or resist and be destroyed by the very systems you used to threaten innocent lives. The Zerion system was completed in less than an hour, with 0 civilian casualties and minimal destruction of infrastructure. It was a textbook example of the new kind of warfare that humanity had developed, precise, coordinated, and designed to minimize harm to innocent populations while making resistance impossible for the oppressors. But the real significance of the operation wasn't military. It was political. For the first time in Empire history, an entire star system had been liberated through the coordinated efforts of multiple species working as true allies. The Nixari had provided stealth technology, the Vorthan had provided technical expertise, the humans had provided quantum coordination, and the local populations had provided intelligence and support. It was a model that could be repeated throughout the galaxy. Dr. Vasquez was reviewing the operation's success reports when she received a message that changed everything she thought she knew about the war they were fighting. Dr. Vasquez, the communication came from an unknown source. This is High Counselor Zentar of the Zephyrian Council of Worlds. I am contacting you on behalf of the civilian government of the former Zephyrian Empire. We wish to discuss terms for a formal end to hostilities. She stared at the message in shock. The Zephyrian Empire wasn't just collapsing militarily. The civilian government was trying to negotiate a separate peace. I should probably mention, the message continued, that the military commanders who ordered the invasion of Earth were acting without civilian authorization. The Council of Worlds has voted to remove them from power and to establish diplomatic relations with the Human Alliance and its member species. This was the breakthrough that humanity had been hoping for. If they could negotiate with the Empire's civilian government, they might be able to end the war without the massive casualties that a complete military conquest would require. But they would have to be very careful. The offer of peace could be genuine, or it could be a trap designed to give the Empire time to regroup and counterattack. Admiral Chen, Dr. Vasquez called out, I'm forwarding you a message that you need to see immediately. We may have just received an offer to end this war. Admiral Chen's response was immediate. Elena, if this is real, it changes everything. Down. The Empire has surprised us before. What neither of them realized was that the message from High Counselor Zentar was indeed genuine, but it was also a sign of something even more significant than the end of the war. The success of the human-led resistance had inspired a political revolution within the Empire itself. Civilian populations throughout former Empire territory were demanding representation in government, demanding an end to the military conquest policies that had defined Empire culture for centuries. Humanity hadn't just defeated the Zephyrian Empire, they had accidentally inspired the transformation of an entire galactic civilization. But the most important transformation was happening within humanity itself. Sarah Chen was no longer a farmer in Kansas. She was the elected representative of Earth's agricultural regions to the newly formed Human Galactic Council, helping to coordinate humanity's response to challenges that no human had ever faced before. The young species that had almost been enslaved was now helping to govern a galactic alliance that included hundreds of different worlds and dozens of different species. The proposal from the Zephyrian civilian government is interesting, she said during the emergency council session. But we need to make sure that any peace agreement includes justice for the species they've oppressed and guarantees that this kind of aggressive expansion will never happen again. Around the council table, representatives from human colonies, allied species, and liberated worlds were working together to draft a response that would reshape the political structure of the entire galaxy. Humanity had become unstoppable not because they were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they had inspired others to believe that freedom was worth fighting for. And once that idea began to spread, no empire in the universe could contain it. The war was nearly over, but the galaxy that emerged from it would be unlike anything that had existed before. A galaxy where no species would ever have to face conquest alone. A galaxy where being different was a strength, not a weakness. A galaxy where the impossible was just another problem waiting to be solved. A galaxy that had learned what it meant to be truly unstoppable. 1 year after the first alien ships appeared over Earth, the galaxy was celebrating the signing of the Terran Accords, the most comprehensive peace treaty in recorded galactic history. The ceremony was being held on Nexus Prime, a neutral world that had been chosen specifically because it had never been claimed by any empire or alliance. Representatives from over 300 different species had gathered to witness the formal end of the Zephyrian Empire and the establishment of the Galactic Federation of Free Worlds. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the HSS Unity, humanity's newest flagship, watching as ships from across the galaxy arrived for the ceremony. Sleek Nexari cruisers materialized from stealth mode. Massive Vorthan freighters carried delegations from the outer rim worlds. Even some of the ancient species that had remained neutral throughout the war had sent representatives to witness this historic moment. But the most remarkable sight was the formation of former Empire vessels flying alongside ships from the species they had once oppressed. The transformation of the galaxy over the past year had been beyond anything anyone could have predicted. Dr. Vasquez, Admiral Jessica Chen called out as she approached the observation deck, "The Council is ready for your presentation." Elena nodded, but she continued looking out at the assembled fleet for another moment. Each ship represented a story of liberation, of species that had been given the chance to determine their own futures for the first time in centuries. The presentation she was about to give would outline humanity's proposal for the new galactic government. But it would also reveal something that most species didn't yet understand about what had really happened during the war. "Admiral," she said quietly, "do you think they're ready to hear the truth about why we won?" Chen joined her at the observation window. "They've seen the evidence today. They've experienced the results. Whether they're ready or not, they need to understand what makes the difference between freedom and conquest." The truth Elena was referring to was something that had become clear only through careful analysis of every major battle and liberation operation of the past year. The human alliance hadn't won because of superior technology or greater numbers. They hadn't even won because of better tactics or strategy, though those had certainly played a role. They had won because of something that no other species in the galaxy had ever possessed: the absolute conviction that cooperation was stronger than domination. The main assembly hall on Nexus Prime was the largest enclosed space ever constructed, designed to accommodate representatives from species with radically different environmental needs. The atmosphere was carefully controlled, the gravity was adjustable by section, and translation systems provided real-time communication in over 400 different languages. High Counselor Zentar of the former Zephyrian Empire was addressing the assembly, formally renouncing the military conquest policies that had defined his civilization for over a millennium. "The Council of Worlds accepts full responsibility for the actions of our military forces." His translated words echoed throughout the hall. "We commit to providing reparations to all species that suffered under Empire rule, and we pledge to support the establishment of democratic governments on all formally controlled worlds." It was a remarkable transformation for a species that had controlled half the galaxy through force. But it was also the inevitable result of the political revolution that had swept through Empire territory when civilian populations realized that conquest was no longer possible. When Dr. Vasquez took the podium to present humanity's proposal for the new galactic government, she began with a simple question: what makes a species truly unstoppable? The assembly hall fell silent as representatives from hundreds of different worlds considered the question. "When the Zephyrian Empire first arrived at Earth," she continued, "they believed the answer was superior technology. They had bigger ships, better weapons, and more advanced systems than humanity could ever hope to match." The holographic display behind her showed the alien ships hovering over Earth's major cities, demonstrating the overwhelming technological advantage that the Empire had possessed. "They were right about the technology," Elena admitted. "With everything we've learned from our allies, human technology alone would not have been enough to defeat the Empire's military forces." Murmurs of curiosity rippled through the assembly. "So why did humanity win?" she asked. "What made us unstoppable when every logical analysis suggested we should have been quickly defeated and enslaved?" The holographic display changed to show the quantum resonator network that had disrupted the Empire's first invasion attempt. The Empire's analysts concluded that humans must possess some kind of advanced quantum technology that they had missed in their initial scans. But that wasn't true either. Every component of our quantum resonators was built using materials and techniques that any species with basic industrial capability could have developed. She could see the confusion on faces throughout the assembly. If humanity didn't have superior technology, how had they accomplished what appeared to be impossible? "The answer," Elena said, "is something that the Empire had never encountered before, something that no conquering force in galactic history had ever had to face." The display changed again, showing the global coordination that had allowed millions of humans to build and operate the quantum network in less than 3 days. Humanity became unstoppable because we refused to fight alone. That statement drew surprised reactions from species throughout the assembly. Fighting alone wasn't unusual. Every species fought alone when faced with conquest. Alliance building was a luxury that was only available to species that weren't under immediate threat of extinction. When the Empire gave us 72 hours to surrender, Elena continued, humanity did something that had never been attempted before. Instead of trying to match the Empire's technology or develop new weapons, we shared everything we had with everyone who needed it. The holographic display now showed the global information sharing that had allowed Earth scientists, engineers, and ordinary citizens to coordinate the construction of millions of quantum devices. We gave away our most advanced research to anyone who could use it. Best, we taught our manufacturing techniques to people who had never seen the equipment before. We trusted strangers with responsibilities that could have determined the fate of our entire species. The recessing. This drew murmurs of amazement from the assembly. Sharing critical technology and information during a crisis was almost unheard of. Most species hoarded their advantages, believing that secrecy was essential for survival. But the real breakthrough came when we realized that our local cooperation could be extended galactically, Elena said. Instead of asking what we could gain from other species, we asked what we could give. The display showed the quantum broadcast that had sparked the Galactic Rebellion. When we accidentally gained access to the Empire's communication network, we could have used that access to gather intelligence about their military capabilities, or to coordinate attacks on their installations, Elena explained. Instead, we used it to share information about the Empire's plans with every species that was threatened by conquest. The assembly was completely silent now. This was the moment that had changed everything. We gave away our tactical advantage because we believed that every species deserved the right to defend themselves. We shared our quantum technology because we believed that cooperation was more powerful than competition. We risked our own safety to help liberate worlds we had never seen, because we believed that freedom was something worth fighting for, even for strangers. The holographic display now showed the cascade of rebellions that had swept through Empire territory as species after species learned that resistance was possible. The Empire never understood this, Elena continued. They believed that power came from taking things away from others. They thought that making their enemies weaker would make them stronger. They were wrong. She gestured toward the assembly hall filled with representatives from hundreds of different worlds. Real power comes from making your allies stronger. Real security comes from ensuring that everyone around you has the freedom to make their own choices. Real strength comes from the willingness to sacrifice your own advantages to help others achieve theirs. High Counselor Zentar was listening with fascination. Even after a year of studying human behavior, he was still amazed by the concepts that humanity considered obvious. Dr. Vasquez, he asked, are you saying that humanity deliberately chose to help potential competitors? That you made yourselves vulnerable in order to help others become more powerful? Exactly, Elena replied, and that choice is what made us unstoppable. The explanation that followed would become required reading in political science courses throughout the galaxy for centuries to come. Every previous galactic conflict had been based on the assumption that resources, territory, and power were finite, Elena explained. Empires conquered others because they believed that making their enemies poorer would make them richer, that taking away others' freedom would increase their own security, and had been military data from the old empire system. But cooperation creates something that conquest never can: exponential growth in capability and security for everyone involved. The display changed to show the technological and economic development that had occurred throughout the galaxy in just 1 year of cooperative development. When humanity shared quantum technology, we didn't lose our advantage. We gained allies who could improve that technology and share their improvements back with us. When we helped liberate other species, we didn't create competitors, partners, research collaborators, and friends who would stand with us against any future threats. Commander Zixtal, who had been granted safe passage to attend the ceremony as part of his cooperation with post-war reconciliation efforts, found himself nodding in agreement despite himself. Over the past year, he had observed the human approach to galactic politics from his unique perspective as a former enemy. What he had seen contradicted everything he had been taught about power and security. The humans weren't just more prosperous and secure than they had been before the war, They were more prosperous and secure than the Empire had ever been at the height of its power, and they had achieved this by giving away everything that the Empire would have hoarded. The Galactic Federation that we are proposing today, Elena continued, is based on the same principle that allowed humanity to become unstoppable. We are stronger when we help each other become stronger. The proposed government structure was unlike anything that had ever existed in galactic politics. Instead of a central authority that controlled member worlds, the Federation would be a voluntary association where each species maintained complete sovereignty while participating in cooperative projects that benefited everyone. There will be no taxation without representation, Elena announced, using a phrase from human history that had been translated into hundreds of languages. There will be no laws imposed on species that did not vote for them. Print. There will be no military interventions without the unanimous consent of all affected parties. But the most radical proposal was the Federation's approach to technology and resources. All scientific research will be shared freely among member species, Elena explained. All technological innovations will be available to anyone who can use them. All natural resources will be traded fairly, with prices set by mutual agreement rather than by whoever has the most military power. The reaction from the assembly was immediate and intense. Some species were excited by the possibilities of unlimited technological and economic cooperation. Others were concerned about losing advantages that they had worked centuries to develop. Dr. Vasquez called out Ambassador Crithian of the Hegemony Worlds. What prevents more powerful species from dominating weaker ones in this system? The same thing that prevented the Empire from conquering Earth, Elena replied. The recognition that cooperation is more powerful than domination. She gestured toward Admiral Chen, who stepped forward to address the military implications of the proposal. The Federation will maintain a combined defense force, Admiral Chen announced, but it will be designed to protect member worlds, not to conquer non-member worlds. Any species that threatens a Federation member will face a response from the entire alliance. This was the guarantee that made the cooperative system possible. Species could afford to be generous with their technology and resources because they knew that aggression against any Federation member would trigger a collective response. But what about species that choose not to join the Federation? Asked another delegate. They are welcome to make that choice, Elena replied. The Federation is voluntary. We will not force anyone to join, and we will not punish anyone for choosing independence. However, we will also not allow non-member species to conquer or exploit member worlds. The debate that followed lasted for 3 days, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The alternative to the Federation was a return to the old system of empires and conquest, and too many species had experienced the benefits of cooperation to want to go back. On the 3rd day, the vote was unanimous. Every species represented at the ceremony chose to join the Galactic Federation of Free Worlds. But the real celebration wasn't in the assembly hall. It was happening throughout the galaxy, on worlds that had been liberated, in communities that had been reunited, among species that were experiencing freedom for the first time in their recorded history. Sarah Chen was back on her farm in Kansas, but now the wheat she grew was being shipped to dozens of different worlds as part of Federation trade agreements. The quantum resonator she had helped build was now part of a galaxy-spanning network that ensured instant communication between any 2 points in Federation space. Her community had gone from fighting for survival against impossible odds to being part of the most prosperous and secure civilization in galactic history, and they had achieved it by refusing to fight alone. Maria Santos was designing starships now, incorporating technology from a dozen different species into vessels that could travel safely to any world in Federation space. The same cooperative spirit that had allowed her to build quantum resonators in a converted hangar was now allowing her to contribute to projects that spanned entire star systems. Dr. Vasquez was leading the Federation's Scientific Research Council, coordinating projects that involved thousands of scientists from hundreds of different worlds. Of quantum physics research that had started as a desperate attempt to defend Earth was now unlocking secrets of the universe that no single species could have discovered alone. Admiral Chen was commanding the Federation Defense Force, a fleet that included ships and crews from every member species. Instead of preparing for conquest, she was training her forces to respond to natural disasters, to protect trade routes, and to explore unknown regions of the galaxy. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation had occurred in the former Empire species themselves. The High Counselor Zentar was now serving as the Zephyrian representative to the Federation Council, working to help his people adapt to a cooperative approach to galactic politics. The species that had once conquered others through force was now contributing to projects that helped other species develop their own capabilities. Commander Zixtel had accepted a position as a strategic advisor to the Federation Defense Force, sharing his military expertise to help design defense systems that could protect member worlds without threatening non-member species. The same tactical knowledge he had once used for conquest was now being used to ensure that conquest would never again be possible in Federation space. The transformation wasn't always easy. Species that had spent centuries competing with each other had to learn new ways of thinking about power, security, and prosperity. But the results spoke for themselves. In just 1 year, the Federation had achieved technological breakthroughs that would have taken individual species decades to accomplish. Trade between member worlds had increased prosperity for everyone involved. The scientific discoveries were being shared instantly across hundreds of light years, accelerating research at an unprecedented rate. Most importantly, no Federation world had experienced war, conquest, or exploitation since the treaty was signed. Elena Vasquez was reviewing the year's progress reports from her office aboard the HSS Unity when Admiral Chen joined her for their weekly strategic review. "Elena," Chen said, settling into the chair across from her desk, "do you ever think about what would have happened if we had tried to fight the Empire alone?" Elena looked up from her reports and considered the question. "We would have lost," she said simply. "Earth would have been conquered, humanity would have been enslaved, and the Empire would still be expanding. And now," Elena gestured toward the view screen, which showed the bustling Federation capital of Nexus Prime. Ships from dozens of different worlds were arriving and departing, carrying goods, people, and information throughout Federation space. "Now we've created something that's truly unstoppable," she said. "Not because we're the strongest or the most advanced, but because we've shown that cooperation is more powerful than conquest." Chen nodded, but her expression was thoughtful. "Do you think it will last? Will future generations maintain this cooperative spirit, or will they eventually fall back into the old patterns of competition and conquest?" Elena smiled. "Jessica, have you seen the latest reports from the Federation Academy?" The Federation Academy was the educational institution that had been established to train young beings from all member species in the principles of cooperative government and scientific research. "The current class includes students from over 200 different worlds," Elena continued. "They're working on joint research projects, learning each other's languages and cultures, forming friendships that cross species boundaries. They're not just learning about cooperation, they're living it." The Academy reports showed something remarkable. Young beings from different species were naturally gravitating toward cooperative approaches to problem solving. They didn't see other species as competitors or threats. They saw them as potential partners and friends. "I think," Elena said, "that we've created something that will outlast any empire that has ever existed. We've created a culture based on the idea that everyone is stronger when everyone else is stronger too." Shen smiled. "You know, when those alien ships first appeared over Earth, I thought we were facing the end of human civilization. Protocol. We were witnessing the beginning of galactic civilization." The truth of that statement was evident throughout Federation space. On worlds that had been isolated for centuries, new spaceports were being built to accommodate trade ships from distant systems. On research stations scattered across the galaxy, scientists from different species were working together to unlock the secrets of faster-than-light travel, quantum computing, and energy manipulation. Most remarkably, on worlds that had been conquered and enslaved for generations, free governments were being established based on the Federation model of voluntary cooperation and mutual respect. The galaxy had learned what humanity had discovered in those desperate 72 hours, when Earth faced impossible odds, that there is no force in the universe more powerful than beings who choose to work together for the common good. The Zephyrian Empire had been truly powerful, controlling vast territories and commanding advanced technology, but the Galactic Federation of Free Worlds had become something far greater. They had become unstoppable, not through force, but through the simple recognition that the universe is large enough for everyone to prosper, safe enough for everyone to be free, and rich enough for everyone to pursue their dreams. And that recognition, once it took hold, spread like wildfire throughout the galaxy, creating a civilization that would endure not because it was the strongest, but because it was the most generous. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and it would last forever, because once beings learned that they were stronger together than apart, they never wanted to go back to fighting alone. The galaxy had finally learned what it meant to be truly unstoppable, the willingness to help others become unstoppable too. In the end, that was humanity's greatest gift to the universe. Not superior technology or military might, but the simple idea that everyone deserves the chance to determine their own destiny, and that helping others achieve their dreams is the surest way to achieve your own. It was an idea that had made humanity unstoppable, and now it had made the entire galaxy unstoppable too.